So, this is it. The Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection releases today. I still can't quite fathom that I can say that sentence aloud and it be true, that it's real. Even with the new manga chapter, song remixes, news, trailers, merch, I still can't quite process that this is happening. Needless to say, excited doesn't begin to describe how I feel about this game finally releasing. But what has me excited the most is that this is the perfect chance for me to introduce new fans to the series. After franchise fatigue buried Mega Man as a whole, a second wind relatively free from burnt out and/or unabashedly racist game journalists is appreciated. But by virtue of being a series released during that chapter in Capcom's life, Battle Network has its fair share of contrivances and the occasional landmine that makes it inconspicuously complicated to approach without a bit of assistance. In this video, I'll be giving a brief introduction to the series for those unfamiliar, as well as an overview of what the Legacy Collection brings to the table. Then I'll list off a few general gameplay tips that more or less apply to all 6 entries. I'll also be giving standalone recommendations for those who want to jump in without needing to commit the time to 6 decent length RPGs. And lastly, for those who do want to take that plunge, I'll be highlighting the most important things you need to know about each game going in. From which game you can skip, to which titles veer into guide game territory, and naturally, which versions you should play once they start diverging with Battle Network 3. So without further ado, let's get started. This is the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection Primer. Mega Man Battle Network is an action RPG series originating on the Game Boy Advance that's set in an alternate continuity to classic Mega Man, where developing communication-based technologies took precedent over robotics. This resulted in a net-centric society that makes life far more convenient, but opens the door for all kinds of cybercrime, since everything from your oven to your doghouse and even your local squirrel statue has a USB port and needs firmware updates. And if the last half of that sentence doesn't set the tone for 90% of this series, I don't know what will. Battle Network follows a young boy named Lan Hikari and his net navigator, MegaMan as the two get caught up in a slew of net-related incidents. The games are written and even paced like shonen battle anime for kids, to the point that most scenarios feel like episodes in a larger season. This series can take itself seriously and even make you choke up a bit when it wants to, but to reiterate, this is a world where statues and katanas are computers, and the first dungeon is your oven. You're not meant to take these games seriously all the time, I assure you. As for the gameplay, Battle Network is divided between the real world and cyber world. Lan explores the real world to find objects to send Mega Man into, whereas Mega Man explores the cyber world to solve puzzles, collect items and money, and delete viruses and random battles. Battles take place in real time on a 6x3 grid, and you can dispatch enemies with either the Mega Buster or the card-like battle chips that you send to Mega Man periodically for special attacks. This blend of strategic and real-time combat, with a helping of card collecting and deck building, lends Battle Network a unique identity that few games have tried or managed to replicate. It's so unique that Battle Network has its own thriving competitive net battling scene that went as far as to implement rollback netcode for one of the most popular games in the series. So now that we've established what Battle Network is, we can go over what the Legacy Collection has to offer. This collection contains source ports of all 6 mainline Battle Network games and their corresponding versions for a grand total of 10 titles. These ports are based on the Japanese GBA versions, so any content cut from the localizations for space limitations like missing areas or scenarios will functionally be restored outside of Japan. There's also your usual Legacy Collection fare, an art gallery, music player, and in-game achievements. The collection also offers an accessibility feature in a similar vein to Rookie Hunter mode from the X collection in the form of Buster Max mode. With the flip of a switch, your Buster will deal 100 damage per shot, making farming for chips or speeding through encounters much easier. Like with ZeroZX, e-reader functionality has been restored, with almost 500 cards ranging from stat modifiers, chips, side quests, and even the base cross form in Battle Network 5 that was only distributed for the Rockman EXE movie. And last but certainly not least, every game in the collection supports online net battling, chip, style, and customizer program trading for the first time in an official capacity ever. And as an added bonus, the Switch version also supports local multiplayer on top of that. Alright, that's enough of the pseudo sales pitch. Let's move on to some pointers that'll hopefully make your time with Battle Network a lot smoother. Above all else, and I might raise a few eyebrows prioritizing this over any other advice, but don't be afraid to find a guide for these games if you hit a brick wall. I love this series to death, but these are RPGs from the early 2000s that flew out of Capcom's doors annually for 5 years straight. Once in a while you'll hit a part that wants you to aimlessly backtrack because they wanted to pad the runtime, or an awkward translation or dungeon gimmick will make a puzzle needlessly complicated. Hell, Battle Network 4 goes as far as making backtracking and mistranslations its identity. So please, just lean on a prehistoric GameFAQs guide or a video walkthrough if you get stuck. Next up, and I swear I'm not trying to call anyone out here, but try to limit the amount of chip codes you're willing to use when you're building a folder. As the tutorial of every one of these games establishes, there are 2 rules that you have to follow when selecting battle chips in a fight. You can select multiple of the same chip regardless of code, and you can only select different chips together if they have the same code. It might be tempting to jam half the alphabet in your folder because those chips have a big number on them, but I promise that you'll have a much smoother time if you just show a little self-restraint. Trust me, you don't want to have to rely on the Buster early on without upgrades, and Battle Network 5 enforces a 3-turn time limit on battles for a good chunk of that game. So you're gonna have to get used to building folders eventually. The final tip I have to offer might sound simple, but it's to interact with everything and everyone. Beyond gleaning flavor text, there are NPCs you can trade battle chips with, you can buy or earn dark chips in Battle Network 5, and on the rare occasion you might come across an optional boss. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you literally never know what unassuming object might have a computer built into it into this terminally online world. So don't hesitate to jam the hell out of that R button in front of every object in sight if you have to. Before we move on to standalone recommendations though, I want to quickly highlight 2 channels that you might find useful throughout your playthroughs. The first being MegaQuint for their full playthroughs of every Battle Network game that'll help if you get stuck but aren't a fan of parsing a written guide. And the second is YukkiEXE, who's already done 2 videos on methods to grind in the post-game for the series' 2 currencies, Zenny and BugFrags. Links to their channels and the corresponding videos will be in the description, so definitely check them out when you have the chance. Oh, and to save you a bit of confusion later, the version of Battle Network 5 Quint did a playthrough of was the DS version, so while there will be some differences between it and the GBA version in the Legacy Collection, it should still serve you well. Now let me see if I can't do a service to those of you here that want to get into the series without, understandably, dunking well over 100 hours of your time into 6 RPGs in a row. I'm going to give you 3 options. One for the strongest gameplay, one for a strong story, and the last is a personal pick. We'll cross that bridge in a moment. As far as the most refined gameplay is concerned, Battle Network 6 is the easiest choice, and depending on who you ask, it isn't even close. Almost every quality of life feature or mechanic introduced throughout the series is present in some capacity. The new setting makes a lack of familiarity with the series a relative non-issue, and again, this game's combat is so stellar that it inadvertently spawned its own esports community. As far as story is concerned though, Battle Network 3 is almost universally regarded as the king on that front. Granted, Battle Network isn't exactly known for weaving the most compelling narratives. Zero and Star Force, this sub-series, is certainly not. But BN3 still manages to tie its scenarios together in a far better manner than the games before it, and the more emotional points in the game don't lose much of their luster if BN3 is your first game. I'm almost sorry for not going into too much detail on this one, but I also kind of can't without running the risk of spoiling things. Now for my personal recommendation. And believe me when I say I can't wait to read comments from other old heads of the series, because this probably isn't what they had in mind. Battle Network 5 is the entry that stuck with me the most growing up as someone who came in with the latter half of the series, so I won't act like this pick doesn't come with a lot of bias attached. But from the story's premise almost necessitating a brisk pace, to striking mechanical balance between the games that came before and after it, I think there's a lot to love. And look, there'll be some people that'll try to tell you that slapping SRPG adjacent elements onto an already jumbled chimera of a spin-off series was an unfathomable mistake. And to those people I ask, who hurt you? What caused you such torment that you were forced to forego the ability to feel joy? Anyway, Battle Network 5 is an immaculate super game, and I hope whoever on that dev team time traveled to 2009, played Devil Survivor, and said, we should do that too, got like 10 raises between then and Battle Network 6. Moving on. With the standalone picks and my second sales pitch over with, let's close out with some of the finer details you need to know on a game-by-game basis in release order. Starting with... I'm not gonna pull any punches here. You can skip Battle Network 1. From the net being sloppily designed, to its dungeons never elevating above subpar, and the combat lacking many of the later game's trimmings, BN1 misrepresents the series horribly. To put it in perspective, I'll have a far easier time recommending the black sheep of the series over this game. That's how dire BN1 is as an entry point. And there's no harm in skipping to Battle Network 2 either. BN1's biggest twist is reiterated every game, you'll be reintroduced to returning characters, and there's always a combat tutorial at the beginning. If you insist on playing Battle Network 1, and you know that you'll still be playing the other games too, at the very least take a guide with you, I beg. If you're one of those brave souls, I wish you luck, because Lord knows you'll need it. Gonna be honest, I don't have anything to say about Battle Network 2. It's significantly more sober than Battle Network 1 mechanically, and we haven't started splitting into versions yet. Beyond reiterating my advice to rock a guide if you get stuck, that's all I've got on this one. Truthfully, I just want an excuse to use its jack-in transition. If Battle Network 2 was the series devs sobering up after a rocky start, then Battle Network 3 is when the corporate suits take their turn to be hung over. This is the point at which Battle Network starts splitting into versions, but not all of these releases are the Pokemon-esque splits you might be used to. Quick history lesson. Battle Network 3 initially released as one version in Japan, titled Rockman EXE 3. Later on, they dropped an enhanced re-release titled Rockman EXE 3 Black that had an exclusive style change, boss, and bug fixes. Simple enough so far, yeah. But when these games were localized as Battle Network 3, Vanilla EXE 3 was changed to BN3 White and received Black's bug fixes, and Black was changed to Blue for reasons I can't begin to fathom. Or in Pokemon speak, they released Diamond and Platinum on the same day, changed Platinum's name to Pearl, and hoped no one would notice. Truly, a marketing decision that's as fascinating as it is unhinged. Point being, if you think you'd like Ground or Shadow style more, pick the corresponding version. The manner of these releases may be confusing at face value, but there are even less differences between White and Blue compared to a set of Pokemon games. Battle Network 4 is many things. It's the aforementioned landmine from the start of the primer, and it's the black sheep that I can recommend over Battle Network 1, despite the fact that it takes almost every negative aspect of the series and makes them its core identity. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way first. This is the guide game of the series. Most of the game involves scenarios that amount to backtracking with next to no directions, so don't just keep a guide on hand, keep it stapled to your damn forehead if need be. As far as versions go, BN4 is the point where the series settles on Navis and transformations being the big exclusives, so just go with whichever double souls or bosses you think you'd prefer. Though do note that one of the Blue Moon Navi operator pairs returns in the Falzar version of BN6 for a side quest, so if that small bit of continuity might influence your decision, keep that in mind. And now, for the fun part. Battle Network 4 is broken up into 3 tournaments, and the majority of scenarios that occur during each round, including version exclusives, are randomized. Which begs the question, how are you supposed to get every double soul if the scenarios are random? Capcom's answer? Make BN4 the only Battle Network to sport New Game Plus. But not just any New Game Plus, Soulsborne New Game Plus. 6 years before Demon Souls. Funny how that works out. While this might sound cool in concept, all this really does is pad out the process of completing BN4 by 2 extra playthroughs. And as the cherry on top, some scenarios can even repeat between playthroughs. So, what gives? How, after all of what I've just told you, can I, in good conscience, recommend that you play this game over BN1? Simple, really. 'Cause it's hilarious. The nonsensical plots for the majority of rounds, combined with a localization that makes X6 read fluently by comparison, rockets this game so far into so bad it's good territory that I can't not recommend it. Each tournament round is short when you're glued to a guide, making BN4 the shortest game in the series, and the combat is even more developed than it is in BN3, so there's still a lot of fun to be had. Is the game worth 3 playthroughs? Hell no. But as a brisk one-and-done romp, it makes for excellent riffing material if you're interested. Thankfully, compared to BN4, Battle Network 5 only has one caveat that has an effect on which version you should play. And that caveat is a little game called MegaMan Battle Network 6. Without delving into spoilers, both versions of Battle Network 6 are written in a way that assumes you played Team Colonel beforehand. But unlike the wrinkle I brought up about Blue Moon and Falzar, the significance Team Colonel has to BN6 is far more consequential than a bit of inconsistent continuity in a side quest. Believe me, I wish I could tell you that either version is fair game, because I love Team Protoman's Navis and Souls to death, but in the interest of you not being horribly lost halfway through the final game, just stick to Team Colonel. And to bring this section full circle, I'm relieved to say that aside from the loose ties between Blue Moon and Falzar, there's nothing stopping you from picking either version of Battle Network 6 to play. Whether you have a preference for one version's Link Navis or the side beast on the cover, you literally can't go wrong with Gregar or Falzar. In fact, because the side quests tied to each Link Navi are so vastly different between versions, this is the one case where I can make an argument that both versions are worth playing if your first run treats you well. And with that, I can safely say that I've told you everything I believe you need to know about MegaMan Battle Network before taking the plunge. Emphasis on believe, of course. I'm sure there's probably something that I didn't deem important enough that other fans might, and I even encourage those fans that find this video to drop their own wisdom in the comments for the new blood. And for all the newcomers, feel free to ask any questions and I'll try my best to answer them. But with this primer now coming to a close, I sincerely hope that I managed to make your journey through this charming spin-off series even a little bit smoother than it would have been otherwise. Thank you so much for watching, have fun with the collection, and remember, no matter what, we're always connected.